Hi, I'm Dr. Duncan Markham.
And I'm Dr. Debbie Lokes.
And we're Ear and Speak here in Melbourne, Australia. Today we're going to talk about, well, the sound like in hard or...
Ahead.
Ahead, oh yeah, good. Yeah, between two vowels. But we first should talk about the name of this sound. So most people in English call this sound aitch or haitch. And there's heaps of debate about what the name of that sound and of that letter, more to the point, is. It doesn't really matter, but we need to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I was growing up in Victoria, all around me people were saying haitch. The teachers didn't always like it, but everybody I knew said haitch. And in fact, even during my teenage years, all I ever heard in Victoria was haitch, whereas my relatives in New South Wales were always saying aitch. And I say aitch because that's what my parents said. You were born in Victoria.
I was, and I heard a bit of variation. I suppose most people said H, as we've been talking about, and a lot of people didn't like that, so there was a lot of correction around it.
And it shows that even in one city, you can have different people doing different things. It's true that in terms of status, most people would say that H is the correct way, but correctness is a real social rule which changes with time as well. Once upon a time, people didn't say H's at all in English. And you see that a little bit in American English, that there are no H's in certain words. H is just this really difficult concept in English.
Exactly. And I suppose the main point is that we all understand what we're talking about.
Indeed we do.
Yes.
So with H, it's really important to remember in English that the letter H is almost always pronounced as an H sound, a H. There are two really common exceptions. They would be our and honest and honour. But it's important if you see it that most of the time it's going to be pronounced. There's one little thing you need to keep in mind though, and that is TH has nothing to do with H.
Exactly. That's th, and that's another case altogether.
Yeah, so although we write H, it's like a complex symbol, the T and the H together. Don't think of it as being anything to do with...
Yeah, exactly.
Now we need to talk about the sound itself, though.
Yeah, so linguists and phoneticians might call that, well, they do call that sound a glottal fricative.
Right. So a fricative is a hissing sound of some sort, or sort of like a rasping or hissing sound.
And the glottis is actually the space between your vocal folds. You can't see it, but it's important to understand that it is used for producing sound.
Yeah, so in here are your vocal cords. They make a buzzing sound if you choose to make a buzzing sound, like or ah. But when you're doing an H, usually you're not doing any buzzing, you're just holding the vocal cords quite tightly and the air flows through it and makes a little bit of a hissing sound.
And a good example people might like to try saying ah and then...
So it's called a glottal fricative, but in fact it's always flavoured by whatever vowel is coming afterwards. So it's a bit like you breathe through the vowel to create a little bit of hissing sound and then you go into the vowel. So an example would be if we're going to say the word hard, the vowel is ah. We've got to go beforehand. So you go ha.
Ha.
Now that's one of the easiest ones to do, I think, for most people. With some other vowels, it sometimes actually sounds a little bit stronger, like if you go E, like in heat or he. So E, he. Yeah. So you breathe through the vowel. There's a little bit of hissing. If you do it too strongly, then it's going to sound wrong. Many other languages have sounds like h or h. That doesn't work in English.
And one of the important things to mention is that we don't use our tongue at all to make that sound.
So some languages do have a sound at the back of their throat where they use the back of their tongue to create some tightness. You can't do that in English. No, they're not going to work. You breathe through here nice and gently, and then you let the vowel happen. Hey, ha, ho, hey.
Yes, and so we could give an example if I said he, which is the way that we do it in English, or if I said he, it sounds a bit too hard.
Yeah, people will almost always understand it, but it's not the ideal solution.
No.
Is there anything else we need to say about H? Or if you speak a language which has nothing at all like an H, say a French speaker or an Italian speaker, that can be really hard to learn to do an H. But if you remember that thing that in English, where you see an H, you almost always have to do an H.
Yes,
I think that's probably the easiest thing to remember. Not TH, though. Yeah. Yeah?
I think that's all we need to say about H.
I think so. I'm Dr. Duncan Markham.
And I'm Dr. Debbie Lokes.
Thank you for watching.